the Chargers are going to have to find several starters in free agency before even thinking about the draft, and it would be really good if they can make the money work to steal someone from a division rival like Justin Simmons.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys, as always, for making us your first listen, and to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it is Free Agency Friday, so before the league year starts and the legal tampering period begins, we got to talk about some of our favorite free agent options at some positions of need, like safety, like corner and center. The Chargers have holes all over their roster. They need to add position groups in free agency and in the draft, so we're going to take a look at some options that might fit for the Chargers.
Yeah, and we'll kind of go through, hey, these are the dream options. If the Chargers end up with more cap space than we want, these guys are on the table. I think Justin Simmons fits there. And then we have some more realistic options, and I think most importantly, some of the ties to the Chargers coaching staff, which I think, as we see this time every year,
it's always important.
Those things make a big difference. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. A surprise move happened this week when the Broncos ended up releasing Justin Simmons, which makes me a little happy just because he's terrorized the Chargers for a long time. And the other thing is, it's kind of the after effects of the Russell Wilson of it all. You made that trade, you spent that money, now you have to deal with the ramifications.
The ripple
and the
effect.
Chargers are as well, right? And today, we're not only going to talk about, guys we think who are unrealistic, but according to Spot Track, 2 years, $22 million for Justin Simmons, something a little lower, around $10 million a year. Right now, it seems that it could be hard for the Chargers to do that, but we just don't know, right? I mean, they could clear 3 cap hits right now that would basically give them, $25+ million in space. So we don't know how it's going to feel. But for me, David, at safety, I really want them to have a starter before they go into the draft. It makes me incredibly uneasy to think about a rookie starting for the Chargers at safety next to Derwin James, especially with the lack of depth they have at that position. Being able to steal someone like Justin Simmons, like we've had to watch with hatred over the last years, like that's one of the dreams, I think, for sure.
It absolutely is. I am sick and tired of watching that guy terrorize the Chargers year after year for the last 8 years. And hello, Derwin James and Justin Simmons, anybody? Yeah. Yes, sign me up for that. I would absolutely love to see that. And then play that Uno reverse card and terrorize the Broncos for a change.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in all pro safety hitting the market, like the thing is, especially for safety, it's hard to imagine the Chargers are going to pay the highest paid safety and spend a bunch of money. But if they can if they're clearing a bunch of cap, and they trade Bosa and Mack, right, or release both those guys, and also Mike Williams and create that space, I think safety is one of the positions I would be willing to spend some money at just to try to solidify that spot next to Derwin James and have that, assuming they don't go with someone like Alohi Gilman and bring him back, right? But Justin Simmons, 3 interceptions, 5 pass breakups total last season, a bright spot on a very bad defense. Love his instincts. He's always been great in that regard. Very solid tackler that I like as well. If the price really does get low, I'm in on Justin Simmons for sure. But David, I know you have a different dream, if the Chargers can clear some space type of a guy as well.
Yes, I do. I mean, this one is probably a pipe dream, and I'm going to say that up front. But if they can make it work, my goodness, it would be absolutely beautiful. I'm talking about Xavier McKinney. McKinney is extremely exciting. 6 foot, 201 pounds, 24 years old. So he is in the absolute prime of his life. An 87.8 overall grade, a 91.2 coverage grade. I mean, this guy was a absolute superstar in coverage. 70.5 run defensive grade. Just shows you he's a very well-balanced player. Here's his 2023 stats. 115 tackles, only 7 missed tackles, 1 forced fumble, 3 interceptions, and a passer rating allowed of only 52.1. And oh, by the way, he played all 17 games last season. Career missed tackle percentage of 7.3%. This guy gets it done. He is an absolute menace back there at the free safety position. He is a natural free safety, a guy coming from a great school, SEC Alabama. But the problem is the contract projections, probably looking around $13.5 million per season. And the Chargers would have to clear a bunch of cap space to be able to make this work. And they would have one of the most expensive defensive backfields in all of the National Football League.
It's one of those situations where it's like, it's probably too expensive, but in the case that he's not and he's cheaper than expected, definitely jump on that. Him and Derwin James would make a great pairing. But let's talk about some more realistic options, right? I think one of the more realistic options that also has a tie to the Chargers is Geno Stone, who spent 2020 with Jesse Minter, who was the Ravens defensive back coach back then before he went to Michigan. And he had Geno Stone, who, David, I don't know if you saw this, 7 interceptions last year.
I sure did.
I think the thing about him is, okay, so the per PFF, $6.5 million per year on average. That's much more stomachable, right?
Oh, yeah.
That one feels much more likely. And it's a dude who had 7 picks. And then you look at kind of what his weaknesses are. It feels like, Derwin James could cover up some of those.
I completely agree. I mean, this is a guy who's definitely more
plus the name too, around Geno Stone. Like that, the Geno Stone is a great name. That's a great
this is a podcast that loves some really great names.
I do.
And I would say Geno Stone is definitely among the upper echelon of names in the NFL. But when we're talking about Geno Stone here, he is very clear what he does extremely well, and that is defend the pass. He has an 84.9 coverage grade, which is 7th among safeties. As Dan mentioned, the 7 interceptions, which is most among safeties. A passer rating allowed of only 53.1 and only surrendered 2 touchdowns. Here's the bad part. Not a great tackler. 33-point run defensive grade, 64 tackles, 15 missed tackles last season. So Derwin James, a very strong, very sure-handed tackler. And then Geno Stone's more of that free safety guy who's going to play that kind of deep part of the field. Obviously, he has the ball skills. I think that would be a good contrast and a good marriage if the Chargers would be able to make it work. And it seems like that's a contract that they can work with.
It does seem like that, and there's obviously the connection there with Joe Ortiz as well, not just Jesse Minter, right? Where, maybe there's some respect there. And had his best season in a Mike McDonald defense this year, right? And I don't think that's any surprise. Jesse Minter does run some 3 safety looks as well, so like having a dude who you wouldn't really need to be up there defending the run or be like a huge part of that, that's why you get him a little cheaper, right? Because he has flaws. But do you feel like you can cover up his flaws, I think is the big thing. Another guy that makes a lot of sense with some ties to the Chargers, Deshaun Elliott, who was with the Dolphins last year. His projection is 1 year, $4 million, right? So you can feel like you're getting a dude who can start at safety for you, a guy who was with Baltimore in 2019, 2020 with Jesse Minter as his DB coach, and is the opposite of Geno Stone because he's a very good tackler, which is nice on the back end.
Yeah, 26 years old as well, so still in the prime of his life, in the prime of his career, 6'1", 210, good size there. 87.3 run defensive grade. So extremely good against the run, still solid against the pass. But he is a fantastic tackler. I mean, 67.7 reception percentage allowed. Also, he posts. He's 850 plus snaps in the last 2 seasons. 1 year, $4 million for Deshaun Elliott. I would absolutely take a flyer on him. I think he would fit extremely well with what the Chargers need. And I'm like you, Dan. I do not want to go into the season with any obvious holes that the Chargers just did not address. I feel like the last 4 or 5 years, we've been going into the season saying, man, I wish they would have addressed this position, because they haven't. And so you want to make sure that you address these positions, you get quality depth so that they can last throughout the season.
Yeah, I think he's a good cheap option. I'll tell you who I don't want. Jamal Adams, Eddie Jackson, Kevin Byard, all guys I would rather have a Lohi Gilman rather than those guys. The one I would say to keep an eye on, Jordan Whitehead from the Jets because of Chad Alexander. A Chad Alexander guy who was there for that signing in New York. They have a surplus of defensive talent, so they just can't keep everyone. So another guy to kind of keep your eye on that could be a little bit cheaper. But cornerback, the Chargers need to add 2 of. They need a starting slot corner. They need a starting outside corner. And Kenny Moore, one of the best slot corners of the last half a decade, is available. I would love that if the Chargers can make the money work, but we have some more realistic options at that position as well. We're getting to that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with that 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. David, we talked about some safeties, but the Chargers have maybe even a bigger need at cornerback, and this feels like something that you can't go into the draft needing 2 starting corners out of it. You just can't, right? Like, to me, you just can't. So if the Chargers, shore up some of their financial issues, if they get some space, I think cornerback is definitely something I'd be willing, like, hey, if this has to be the kind of marquee signing, if it's a free agent corner and they want to go for a proven guy they think is a starter right away, I would be fully in favor of that. And I think the guy you start with, especially since you don't have a starting slot corner right now with, Bryce Callahan being that guy a couple of years ago, Jasir Taylor getting benched in that role, Asante Samuel Jr. trying to play that role last year and not really being able to do it, right? So you don't really have anyone that fits that on the roster. Kenny Moore is the guy, David, especially with just how important the slot corner role is in Jesse Minter's defense, right? You look at what Mike Sainristil was able to do, right? And how important he was to that defense. It's an important position for them on this defense. He's the guy that has the proven production, is still playing at a pretty high level, and is going to come, I think, at a price that's more affordable than people would think.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to like about Kenny Moore. 5'9", 190 pounds. He's 30 years old. He's a 7-year vet. This guy has over 3,500 snaps in the slot. So this guy is a career slot corner. So he has done it at a very high level for a very long time. His 2023 stats, 88 tackles, 2 sacks, 3 interceptions, 4 touchdowns allowed. He's only one game where he missed more than 2 tackles, though. So I want to put that in perspective. He is a very, very sure tackler. He's earned a career-high 79.3 coverage grade along with a 71.5 run defensive grade, which that run defensive grade is over – it's 6 straight seasons above 65 for the coverage grade. So,
and 65 is, well above average. For the
yes,
most part,
I mean, it's very, very consistent. And I would love to bring in a veteran. I mean, I liked what the Chargers did when they brought in Bryce Callahan. So bringing in a guy like Kenny Moore who has all of this experience and has played at a very high level, I think this would be a great signing for the Chargers to make you feel a little bit better about that cornerback position.
And the thing is at his age, you wouldn't have to pay, like, the price seems more realistic. 2 years, 6.75 on average, right? Like, it's not going to doom you for a long time, especially with these 2-year contracts where it's like you usually have an out after the first year.
Yeah.
Because what you don't want is a J.C. Jackson, obviously, situation where you have 4 years tied up in this dude and you're paying him top dollar. Not that Kenny Moore and them are, equal prospects when they're free agents, but, like, it's just like, hey, you feel okay with this because this is not something that if it doesn't work out right is going to hurt you for a long time. But what it does do is let, if you want to go the Jasir Taylor option, you let him develop, right? Or you can draft a slot corner later on in day 3 of the draft and let them kind of season and learn under someone like Kenny Moore. So it gives you options. He's older, probably going to be a shorter term option. One of my favorite fits for the Chargers if they go that way. It was, a very heavy cover 3 centric guy in Indianapolis. So it'd be interesting to see how that kind of, even though Jesse Minter does play some cover 3, not like they do with Gus Bradley, right, in that defense. But also, I think the other thing too is like, a slot guy, but has over 1,300 career snaps on the outside too. So like, hey, in a pinch, you need him to pop out there. He could do it if he needs to. But they do need outside corner as well. They need someone that is going to kind of take that Michael Davis role for them in this defense, David, or, just replace him because he's likely not coming back. And Steven Nelson is a guy who, mid-range type of money who could come in and start for you and give you a very solid option on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, Steven Nelson, if that's a familiar name, then it should be because he played for the Chiefs for a very, very long time. And so you went up, the Chargers went up against him many
guy
times.
we've seen a lot of, too.
Yeah,
right?
definitely seen a lot. And he's been in the league for a long time. 5'11", 194 pounds. He's 31 years old. He has 950-plus snaps for 6 consecutive seasons. So this is a guy that he is going to be on the field.
Durable.
He definitely posts. Last year, 1,001 snaps at outside corner. So he is more of a true outside corner. He has experience doing both. But 61 tackles, only 7 missed, 4 interceptions, and 6 pass breakups. So he has really good production there. And here's my favorite part. Only 1 touchdown allowed all season last season. So he
Compare
is going
that to Michael Davis. I think Michael Davis gave up,
9?
Yeah.
Yes, 9. Yeah. Passer rating allowed of only 70.6, and contract projections looking at only $7.25 million on the average annual value, and that's definitely for an outside corner. That is a number that I can live with very comfortably. And even with him being 31 years old, I feel good about it because this is a guy that stays on the field and he gives you that availability.
And like we talked about, short-term option, right?
Right.
2 years is what the project is. He's a little older. He helps you bridge the gap while you can get guys into this system and start developing them, because you can't develop guys in one season, right?
No.
So if you bring in someone like a Steven Nelson, like a Kenny Moore, even though they're older and that, like, first of all, beggars can't be choosers, and the Chargers are going to have to be a little, they're not going to have a lot of wiggle room as far as what they can spend anyway. So it's
hopefully the Jim Harbaugh effect plays a little bit into
it. Sure. Michigan Wolverines out there, right? Hear the call. But I do think like this is someone like as you start drafting guys, right? Especially the Chargers trade back and start adding a bunch of youth in the draft. You need kind of these stopgap guys who are going to help you stay competitive in 2024, right? But also give you time for the rest of these guys to season under them and step into bigger roles.
Give them a veteran presence too.
And that you have there for when you don't want to have to re-sign these guys. You want to let them go and, give you those compensatory picks. That's how you do it, right?
Yeah.
For a value option, you brought up a pretty interesting one. Another guy that we've seen in the division a little bit, Ronald Darby, as a potential, free agent flyer. You need a body in that room. You could get worse than Ronald Darby.
Yeah, I mean, 30 years old, played only 11 games last year, but a reception percentage allowed of under 50%. So, he did pretty well when the ball was being thrown his way. Only allowed 1 touchdown and had 4 pass breakups. And also his season grade was 36th out of 127. So, pretty good for a cornerback, a 70.8 overall grade, and then looking at a contract projection of only $2.5 million. So you could do a whole lot worse than getting a guy who has a ton of experience, that has bounced around, played for a couple of different franchises, but can give you some high-quality play. You just got to hope that he's able to stay on the field to be able to give you that production.
Yeah, well, he actually did. He didn't start every game last year, but he showed up in 16 games for the Ravens, and that's the thing. He was with the Ravens, so that's where the connection is here last year. He didn't necessarily start for them in every game, but he was on the Ravens all last year and had a much better bounce back season health-wise, because the reason that his projection is only 1 year, $2.5 million is because of the major injuries that he's had, right? He had a shoulder injury, multiple hamstring injuries. He's torn an ACL twice in his career, right? That's the reason you're getting him for $2.5 million. So this is we need bodies in that room. When he's out there, he still is playing at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
He played with the Ravens last year. You have the connections there.
You got the familiarity.
Let's see if we can just add to that room, right? And you let him and Dean Leonard battle it out, or just another short stopgap to where maybe he plays the first 10 games, but that lets your rookie corner have a little bit more time to get his feet wet in the NFL and ready to take over for him, right? So cheap option, very realistic as far as, he has ties to the Chargers, right? And he's also probably going to come pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Jordan Lewis is a guy I would say under the radar guy to keep an eye on just because he played college at Michigan, right? So we'll see how much those ties, because you don't really usually have those ties. Like Brandon Staley, you have other guys in the NFL, right, that played with him in the NFL. Jim Harbaugh has Michigan Wolverines everywhere, all over the country.
That's for sure.
In the NFL, right? They're repping the M big time. There's so many. I just looked up, how many Michigan Wolverines? And there's, it's 40 to 50 dudes.
And if you watch last night's show or yesterday's show, you would know that the Michigan Wolverines love them some Jim Harbaugh.
They absolutely do. Played with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan from 2014, 2016. Was not there, obviously, for the Jesse Minter years. But someone, I wouldn't, if it's just a depth guy, just someone you need a body in the room, I get it. Wouldn't be my first pick, but it would make sense just because of that tie. We do have another very, very important position, though, because we know that Corey Linsley is 99% likely to retire. And Jackson Powers-Johnson isn't walking through those doors. So it would be great if the Chargers could find a starting center in free agency, or at least someone to help them out there, because going into the draft needing 2 centers, not a great thing, and you're probably not going to end up with the guy you like where you want to take them at. So we're going to talk about some dream options for the Chargers at center, someone that could come in and stabilize that position, and even some younger dudes and some, more value options that could become available in free agency. So we're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, first, though, I do want to tell you guys about Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. I think the last thing that people want to do when you're getting tickets to something is, first of all, not knowing the view that you're going to have from your seat and just basically clicking on a colored box. And the other thing is how much is my ticket going to increase in price after I click on it, right? Those are things you do not have to worry about with Game Time. With Game Time, you always see the exact view from the exact angle from the seats that you're sitting in. And the other thing is no hidden fees. What you click on, you see one of those lightning deals, you click on it, that's the price you're going to get. And that is such a good peace of mind to have when you're buying tickets, because they also give you the Game Time guarantee. If you find a same seat and row that you're going to sit in cheaper somewhere else, they will refund you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That means anything you're about to go do, you can save $20 with the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off when you create an account. So download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, David, well, it's time to talk about some centers, because center is very symbolic. It's the middle of the offensive line, and I think we learned with Corey Linsley, and maybe even learned more with Dan Feeney, how important the center position is. So we're going to talk about
contrast.
They could come in and help the Chargers in a position that really kind of started the beginning of the end for this offensive line last season, and nothing was the same after Corey Linsley went out. But I do want to tell everyone to make sure you're checking out after this the first ever national 24/7 sports streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, which covers every sport and gives you the local insight that only the local experts can provide. So make sure you guys go check that out and subscribe to Locked On Sports Today. Let's talk about centers, David. I know when we're doing this, there's kind of tiers. Some guys are more realistic than other guys, but I know you have a dream option that if the Chargers can make it work, you would like to potentially steal somebody from a division rival.
Absolutely. The name that came to mind here was the Broncos center, Lloyd Cushenberry III. This guy has a lot that you would love. I mean, he's 26 years old, right in the prime of his life, prime of his career here, 6'4", 315 pounds. In 2023, had 1,070 snaps, only 1 sack allowed, 4 hits, only 14 pressures. Also had a very respectable 72.4 run block grade. He's young, he's durable, and he is damn good. But the only problem is when you mix all of those things together, that requires a boatload of cash. And we're talking about at least $12.5 million on the average annual value. I just think that when you look at the center position and you look at how phenomenal it was to have Corey Linsley in the middle, have that commander, have somebody that was really one of the better centers in the game. And then you were seeing the drop off when he got injured and he was not out there. That just makes me want to get a high quality center again to pair with Justin Herbert, to take him into the rest of his, great career. I mean, the next 5 years of his contract, you want to pair that with a really, really high quality center.
Yeah, and someone, was played 16-plus games in 3 of his 4 seasons, did miss 9 games in 2022 with a groin injury, but someone who's only 26 years old. So you're investing in a young player going into his prime. Probably going to be too expensive for the Chargers. If he's not, though, I mean, I like him. I think also just a guy who very, very elite pass rusher. Because he said, hey, gave up pass blocker. He only gave up 1 sack last year. He's only given up 2 sacks over the last 2 seasons. So shows you how good he is in that regard. Not as good of a run blocker as he has a pass blocker, but someone that I think, if he came for the right price, you could set yourself up there for years to come. You would do it. But there's a little bit of a cheaper option in the division that makes a lot of sense too, David, and that's Andre James, whose Pro Football Focus projected contract is $9 million on average. So, $3.5 million discount from where they have Lloyd Cushenberry. The Lloyd Cushenberry thing makes me feel old because, like, we were pretty into the draft. Like, I remember breaking down that dude coming out of LSU and liking him, right? But this is a guy in Andre James, UCLA alum. Maybe he wants a homecoming there. And another guy who, if you could steal him from the Raiders, that would be awesome too.
Yeah, 960 snaps the last 3 seasons, a 74.6 grade, 71 pass block, 75 run block. So very even, both sides. One pressure every 50 pass blocking snaps last season. 4 sacks, 4 hits, only 19 pressures allowed. So this is a guy that, the Raiders moved on from their former center to insert him into the middle of their offensive line. And they made a very good decision because Andre James has been fantastic for the Raiders. And I would love to be able to take him and bring him over to the Chargers and pair him, with Justin Herbert and protect him. Looking at around $9 million on the average annual value, still pretty high, and still going to have to move some money around to probably make that happen. But I still love the idea of getting a more premium center to pair with Justin.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about him, too, that you see is just never really had a terrible game, right? Allowed 2 pressures or less in 15 of the 16 games. The only game he had, worse than that is he had 1 game where he allowed 3 pressures. So pretty solid, pretty consistent, stealing from a division rival. If it somehow is less than that $9 million, right? If you can get that around $7 million or something like that, then the numbers start to line up a little bit better. But that isn't as unrealistic of an option as Lloyd Cushenberry. But that's just us saying, hey, we would be willing to invest in a good center, right, to solidify that in the middle of the offensive line. Somebody that has played really well and kind of had a renaissance last year in his first full starting season playing center, was someone that wouldn't even have to leave town to join the Chargers. Maybe that's a pitch there. And it's Coleman Shelton, the center from the Rams. His projected contract is going to be 3 years, $5.3 million on average. You're talking about a 3-year, $15 million option right after you had Corey Linsley at like $12, $13 million. So a guy that's $5 million feels a lot more doable. Just helped Kyron Williams rush for over 1,100 yards in only 12 games last year. This is someone, David, that, hey, if you're looking for that mid kind of range, somewhere around that, he's the guy that feels like he makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, he does. 28 years old, 6'4", about 300. Played 1,113 snaps in 2023. 2 sacks allowed, 34 pressures. Had a pretty good 72.6 run block grade, and he brings some positional flexibility because he has played guard and he has played center. So having somebody that can move in a pinch is always going to be valuable for any NFL team. So I like that. At $5.33 million at the average annual value, I think that's a pretty good value for a player that's coming off of one of the better years of his NFL career.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I think the other thing, especially PFF brought this up, and I think it's a good point, which is just he really had his kind of breakout season last year when the Rams went to a more gap-heavy running scheme, which is what Greg Roman's going to bring to the Chargers. Baby. So, and he really excelled in that. So finding someone like him would make a lot of sense. It's a good fit. He wouldn't have to leave town. Much more stomachable as far as what the price is going to be. I would say the last couple here, more under the radar because of the connections type of guys. I would say Graham Glasgow was someone who's with the Lions last year, has been primarily a guard, but has, I think, about 500 snaps at center over the last couple of seasons. So has some versatility there. And also a former Michigan Wolverine in Jim Harbaugh's time. And another guy that played for Michigan, Mason Cole, is also out there, another Wolverine, where he's a guy that, I would say is maybe a backup, maybe more of a backup, but like if he comes in cheaper, just so you have a body at that position, right? Like because you need it, what I mean? Because right now you're probably not bringing, back Will Clapp. Corey Linsley's likely retiring. You probably need to, at least you'd have somebody there so you don't go into the draft. It's like, hey, we have Mason Cole, but at the same time, like
to upgrade.
It's like, at least we have somebody there, but it's not going to stop us from taking a good center in the draft if one falls into our lap, right? So I did say those are kind of bargain, more under the radar because of connection fits, but like the Chargers are going to have to probably add one of each of these positions during free agency. How much they're going to be willing to spend, how much space they're going to have, that's the part that's yet to be seen. But the good news is I'm sure we're going to get a lot of cuts and things like that over the weekend, and we'll still have more free agents we can get to, some more, tight ends, defensive line. We talked about running backs a little bit already, but there's more to get into. And Monday is Mock Draft Monday. So make sure you guys are here for that. And make sure, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. Definitely looking at some second round picks. I don't know if it'll just be like our favorite second round picks. Maybe we'll do a 2-round mock draft. Undetermined, but we're getting into some more prospects over the weekend, so I'm excited about that. You guys can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find us on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk SD. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate the everydayers out there. Thank you guys for checking out this show. Make sure you guys are back here on Monday. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.